All right. Well, why don't you go ahead and give us the technical update, and then we'll move on from there.
All right. All right. So this is Community Update 137. Welcome. We have a new version of 0925 running on the mainnet, all nodes, all validators and observers. So it's 0925.4, and this release has improvements to the LMDB. For the longest time we had an ephemeral bug where the data would be corrupted, or we would get this error that says you're trying to get more bits out of a vector than are available. That was a JVM error. So that's resolved, and that fix is now in on all the mainnet nodes. In addition, it also has some improvements to LMDB store, especially in the Tomislav added multiple key support for LMDB store. So that's what is there running on all the mainnet nodes at this point in time. We have made substantial progress on 0926. As we speak, Tomislav is trying to run the final set of integration tests to create the 0926 last finalized state beta. And it was being developed in a separate feature branch. So he's trying to merge the feature branch and run the final integration tests right now. So that should be released sometime this week, most likely tomorrow, if not latest by Friday. We should have the beta release if you want to play with it. And we are also still developing more tests for the last finalized state. So if you, I know last finalized state has been going on for a while, but I guess we have had 3 alpha releases and a lot of testing on that, and each testing improving things along to get to beta and then the final one when we'll have it. So that's where it is. All networks are running 0925.4, other than what I mentioned about the testing for 0926 beta. So the piece the one that's Tomislav is currently merging, that's actually a big PR. It's got a few different issues resolved in that. So one of them, the main one, is the fixing the requesting of blocks and chunks of state. And then there are other ones, such as the node cannot request approved block. This was something that was happening in the last finalized state code, which is not on the mainnet or anywhere else. This is just in that feature branch that we were running tests and then creating the issues and then resolving those. So that's kind of where those are some of the issues that are being resolved in there. The gist for last finalized state specification is at this link. So for those that are interested in figuring out what last finalized state, how it works, and its relationship to the rest of the system and the conditions, like bonding and all that, please read that specification and comment if you have any questions or suggestions. Go ahead and add issues in the main GitHub, Rchain GitHub. The other thing that we have is Will has started on the API side. Will has started OpenAPI Swagger standard documentation for the API, and that's this 3128 item. So that should help people, developers that are either familiar with it or in general, we can use all the tools that are out there for Swagger to make it easier for people to use the API. So that effort has started. It's not complete yet, but we will put some focus on the usability of the API, ease of use, because certainly the current developers in the community have mentioned how hard it would be for newcomers to come and pick up Rchain and start doing things. So we're trying to simplify things there, especially in view of the hackathon that we have. The upcoming hackathon that's planned. So let me speak to that. So there is a substantial amount of work to be done for the hackathon, and that's in process. The registration page for the hackathon is ready. And last few days, we were going back and forth on the October 10th and 11th dates that we originally talked about. And we have decided to push that back by about 3 weeks. The main reason for that is that we learned from Code Tantra that the October 10th and 11th dates may be conflicting with the exam dates for many of the schools in India for sure. Because of COVID, apparently the exam schedules are much more spread out this year than normal. So we wanted to make sure that people have the opportunity to both prepare for the hackathon, because they do need to learn Rchain at the very least as a new thing. So both prepare for and participate and pay attention to the hackathon. So for that reason, we pushed it out by 3 weeks. Should give us also a little bit more time to prepare for it. We had the first, we've had several hackathon planning sessions within the team, but we started with engaging with the developers in the community yesterday, and there'll be many more of those activities. We need to get a lot of work done. We need to get the question or test question banks for the qualifying test that we're going to give to the registrants. And then they will go through a pull request process on GitHub. We will encourage the people to come, the candidates to come up with their own problem statements, but we do have the theme of governance and coordination, and then basically the self-proposed problem statements, whatever they might be. We need to think about, during the hackathon, we probably want to have brief technical talks or tips and tricks kind of thing, so that people can get up to speed relatively quickly. And we need folks to support the participants during that 48-hour window of the hackathon, pretty much on a continuous basis. So we need to have a few senior developers from the community holding office hours during that time, so that the hackathon participants can go to somebody if they have problems. So there's all of that, and then there's help needed in judging and help needed in improving documentation, whatever we can do ahead of time. Any learning links that you think are particularly useful, we want to be able to push them out to the hackathon participants. All of that. So the current plan is to use the rchain.github.io, which is a site that Toby started, to use that as a hub of all learning materials, so that folks can go to a single place and find most of what they need to learn about the platform, about Rchain, and how to do contracts and sample contracts and tutorials and everything. So that's the thing around the hackathon. And hopefully, in preparing for the hackathon, we would make life easier for the current developers also. We're kind of getting, this is a key element of getting ready for a developer ecosystem. And a hackathon is just one of the events, but the developer ecosystem is the larger goal that we're moving towards. So any and all help you can provide there, anywhere from marketing through to any of the tasks that I just talked about. Please, please participate in the hackathon activity. Then tech governance wise, we had a meeting last week. Mostly that meeting focused on network security, especially relative to making sure that the staking is spread over a longer time than the 4 months. I mean, right now, the way we have it is that 4 months is the minimum you can stake for. Most people are staked for that. Some people have expressed a desire to stake for longer, but relatively a small percentage. So the question is, how do we make sure that we can have a rolling on, rolling off stake, whereby the stake is distributed over a longer period of time, so that we don't have specific dates or events, such as, for example, the end of this 4-month period in the current epoch. We don't want to have a specific period where we worry about, oh, you know, like now, how much stake are we going to get? Instead, we want to keep it a continuous on, continuous off with a delay type of a time frame, so that new people can join any time in the stake, and that there is always a certain amount of stake that's spread out over ideally at least 2 years or so, but that is under discussion to really say, you know, what time frame. Do we take 10 quarters or longer? So that's part of the discussion going on in the, that was what was going on last week. And around that is also the conversation about how do we make sure that everybody pays for the security of the network, all the token holders pay for the security of the network. Because if some people are staking and some people are not, by definition, the people that are staking are giving up some degree of freedom. So how do we make sure that everybody shares in that burden is the other side of that we're discussing. So once these discussions go somewhere and we have a model of what the team agrees on, we will have that, we'll put it up for discussion by the larger review and discussion by the larger community. So that's what was last week at Tech Governance. And I think the next Tech Governance meeting is going to be more on the technical side, because we have all these changes coming up in preparation for block merge and all that. There are issues we need to resolve about, okay, how do we change the proof of stake contract? How do we, you know, what are the things, what are the processes we need to go through to enable that? If we do a hard fork, what are the things we need to do? So there's a bunch of technical issues that the development team wants resolved, so that we have those decisions made well ahead of actually having a situation where the code is ready for changing the state or for a hard fork, things like that. So we need to focus on that probably for 1 or 2 sessions at least going forward. So that's where we are with the tech governance. I think that's mostly my update. Are there any questions, comments on any of this at all, either on the development side or the hackathon or tech governance pieces that I spoke to?
So how many releases from beta do we get to where we're happy with 0926?
I think at least after the beta, I'm assuming probably 1 or 2 releases. No more than that is is the plan. What's going out today, tomorrow, whatever, is the beta. So the next release or the one after, but it depends on if we discover any other issues, I guess. But if we don't discover any issues, it may be the next release. Otherwise, it'll be the following release.
Sounds good. Sounds good. All right. Any other questions for Rao? Okay. Moving on, Daryl, do you want to give us a week in review, community in review?
Sure. Hey, everybody. So here's the Community Week in Review for Thursday the 10th to today, Wednesday the 16th. So last Thursday on the Governance Committee call, the main topic of conversation was RV 2020, the on-chain voting process for the AGM. Also on Thursday, the DApp Developer Working Group converted voting tally shell script to JavaScript using Agile Object capability. On Friday, on the Climate and Coordination RCast, we discussed the wildfires on the west coast of the US. I hope everybody out there is breathing okay. Apparently the cloud is spreading across North America. We've got it up here in Kelowna right now, so it's been pretty heavy and hazy. And then we talked about the U.S. House of Representatives' newly proposed COMPETE Act. COMPETE standing for American Competitiveness of a More Productive Emerging Tech Economy, and how that act could apply to Rchain. Then on Saturday in the RChat call, we discussed the next steps for the dust approach for voting and whether we need to improve the usability for the AGM. And we created and assigned some GitHub issues to individuals for follow-up. And at 8:30, the DApp developers, they reviewed tool development for hackathon programmers and liquid democracy development. On Monday, in the Casper stand-up, Greg discussed the generalization of the pre-sheaf construction to support different collection semantics. And you can check that out by searching for Casper stand-up on YouTube. And on the Blockchain Art Call, they did a user experience test of the new voting system, and they discussed Eric's XR Performance project and related app and whether or not he should issue a utility token to fund the project, and which jail he would be sent to if he decided to go that route. I wish I was there in that call. Sounds interesting. On Tuesday, in the Rchain education call, they learned about the Rnode API Swagger interface, dev tools, explore deploy, and JQ JSON processing and bash script. Also on Tuesday, in the communications working group, we discussed expanding out of our bubble in social media, asking members to create Dappy pages, the latest hackathon plans, creating a walkthrough of the voting process, and new weekly Chinese community updates. I'll speak more about that later. And Dan's request to brainstorm on names for Rolang Game Manager and Rolang Contract Manager, etc. Today, there was no members hangout in Jim's room. He was tied up in another call. And that brings us to now. And I would just like to say that we're starting a new segment in the Community Week in Review, thanks to co-op member Shixi, where she is going to provide us with a recap of what's been going on in China. So here's the first one. So they hosted an online educational event about how to make a Dappy homepage. They also announced that they're going to do a competition for the Chinese community to make Dappy homepages. And they have a Chinese member who's researching how to create a gaming pool on Rev. So again, thanks Shixi for that update from China, and hope to continue on this tradition every week now. And that brings us to the present. Back to you, Greg.
Well, thanks very much. Any questions for Daryl?
No questions, but I just wanted to encourage everyone in the community to follow Rchain on Instagram and also to subscribe on YouTube, because we're really posting a lot more stuff there now. So thank you, everyone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And especially, you know, the more people we have posting about the recent voting app or the work we've done on RChat, all of that is actually quite critical to starting to get the attention that we want on the platform. I don't think people understand how much we've lowered the bar in terms of being able to generate interesting and highly useful applications on top of the chain. So the more we can bring attention to this, the better. All right, then. Let's see. I'm going through all the topics. There are several that have to be relegated to the closed door session on Friday. But as we mentioned last Friday, one of the things that we're looking at is the sponsorship model for dApps on RSAS, and we're, how do I say this? So we want to acknowledge that there are many more click-to-play events than click-to-pay. So in particular, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Google, Gmail, Google Maps, etc., have almost no click-to-pay events and lots of click-to-play events, in the sense that all the engagement is about using the service and collaborating with other users of the service. And in fact, when you think about it, sponsorship for click-to-play is the economies are bigger than oil. They are, in fact, the largest economies in the world. So this makes a lot of sense to follow. And we want to support that. Some of the, if you think about it just from the end user perspective, it's simply too unwieldy to charge users on a per transactional event. So there are two additional options, right? One is that they can pay a subscription, and for a lot of users that's going to work. But for many users, that's not going to work. However, for the blockchain generation, sponsored engagement has to be differentiated from surveillance capitalism, right? This seems to be a given for the kinds of user bases that we're interested in, also in terms of Rchain's own ethics. So hopefully that makes sense. Is that resonating with folks?
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that too. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Daryl.
No, that's okay, Nora. Go ahead.
Well, I would just put in the chat, there's a link to a film that's been very popular on Netflix recently called The Social Dilemma. And it talks a lot about, these business models, that it's not just the existence of social media that is causing so much disarray, I guess we'll say, around the world, but really the business model. And I learned a lot watching that film, and I'm so glad to hear you acknowledge that, Greg.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, and thanks for that film. That looks quite interesting. I'm looking for time to watch it. It also, one of the things that is in alignment with those propositions is that we want to focus on dApps that actually create communities. And part of the reason for that is, that is obviously that's the R in everything Rchain, right? It's about our communities, our chain. But it also, it has a clear business advantage. Communities that self-identify through a particular dApp, that are also willing to have their dApp engagement be sponsored, they've already provided key market data about their demographics, right? So West Seattle Knitting Club, right? The dApp that they're using to exchange, pattern ideas and tips and tricks about yarn and particular knitting knots, all of that. So that the dApp creates their sense of community, and the extent to which, the West Seattle knitting club is willing to have their activities be sponsored, they've identified themselves as the West Seattle Knitting Club. And so there's a lot of demographic specific information that sponsors can utilize just in that self-declaration. Now, obviously, sponsors will be interested in more data. And so, what we're contemplating for RSAS is a couple of different kinds of APIs, right? So one is an API for the submission and delivery of sponsored content to end users. So a DApp that wants to allow sponsorship would avail itself of those APIs. And then there's another set of APIs for self-disclosure of additional key demographic data, right? So creation of polls and that sort of thing. And this would allow for, again, rather than surveillance capitalism, these communities are reveal what they're comfortable revealing and nothing else. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's just I think the thing that we really need to kind of make clear here is that the intention here is to turn surveillance capitalism on its head. It's the number one way money is generated now in the world. And all the money, so much of the money, is getting siphoned to these silos that are the richest people in the world. And there's a myriad of problems that are being identified everywhere now. I just saw another headline today that Zuckerberg and Facebook knew that they were utilizing outside external exploitative forces to manipulate the minds of potential voters. It's a problem. It's a serious, big problem. And so we need to provide the solution for that. So I just want to kind of emphasize that that's what we're working on here.
Agreed. Absolutely. But the nice thing is that we're we're creating a framework and an architecture whereby those agents that want to have their engagement with a particular DApp be sponsored can also participate in the economic proposition. So while it's an ethical concern, and I'm 100% with you, Daryl, it's also an economic concern. I mean, the issue is that the users of Facebook generate the content. The users of Twitter generate the vast majority of the content. And that's what brings the audience, right, is the fact that there's content that they find compelling. But those users are not participating in the economic proposition. And so with self-disclosure and with participation in other ways in the engagement with sponsored content, the community that's using the DApp needs to get a cut of all the revenue that is generated from the delivery of sponsored content. So, and once they have more economic power, then that frequently translates into other aspects, such as, essentially what we're saying is that the consent and the economic power together move the needle considerably in terms of how empowered the community is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'll also just add one more little thing. I recall that Andrew Yang, who was running for president in the United States this past cycle, had a very interesting idea to give people like a Facebook dividend or a data dividend, much like the oil dividend that people in Alaska have received in the past. I need to remember exactly what he called it, but anyway, it was basically a share of the profits of that are generated from, you know, today's social media business models.
Yeah, and it doesn't work so well when Facebook is a privately held company. It works a lot better once you have an information utility that's decentralized and effectively owned by the entire community.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I would argue that the Yang proposal, as noble as it might sound, actually helps empower Facebook more as they go through the legal challenges that they're facing.
But I do think it was
gives them a
bold
way
for him
out,
to even bring it to the forefront of conversation. I think was important. You know.
Yeah.
Agreed.
But we don't want to give them a legal way out so they can continue to practice surveillance capitalism on us.
Right. Exactly.
So, you know,
Exactly.
but you know, the idea that our data has value and we should be the ones that that benefit from that value. That idea that Andrew Wang has kind of put to the forefront is an important one for us as citizens of the world to fully grasp. Basically, what's happened in the last 20 years is that the norms have evolved in such a way where we are so willing to give up some of the most intimate details about ourselves, just willingly. You know, George Orwell would be rolling in his grave. You know, the idea of a TV that's always on, that's always looking at you in 1984, that TV follows us into our cars, into our restaurants where we go. You know, it's everywhere. So, you know, it's gotten, you know, it's like 1984 on steroids. But it's not the government that's spying on us, it's corporations. And so for some reason, I guess there's like a sentiment that has evolved in our culture where we trust that more than we trust government. And so we're just letting them do this to us. So we're talking about a big problem because we have to reverse the norms. And that's the hardest of all of the four different ways human behavior is manipulated in a system. Norms are the hardest ones to change.
Agreed, but I think you know, again, continuing to appeal to people's economic interests is going to have a major impact. I mean, right now the creative classes are just devastated, right? Because it's so easy to push content, and the biggest platforms are putting the squeeze on them. YouTube put the squeeze on musicians. Now Facebook is putting the squeeze on musicians in terms of their Facebook Live access, and in a time period like COVID, where musicians can't go directly to an audience in a venue, then there's it's not a good situation. And the same is true for most of the creative classes, not just the musicians. And so the argument is, by making it a platform where all of those who are producing and consuming content have a share of the data economy. That's the thing that seems to be I think taking a step back, what we've seen from the political discourse in the US is that no matter how impassioned or logical the political dialogue is, it's not moving the needle, right? There's a more visceral tribal response. But you can definitely move the needle if you're talking about people's bottom line. And that's where I think we have to begin the conversation. How does this change the bottom line for people? And in a situation where the creative types are being squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, this changes the bottom line for those people, as well as changing the bottom line for other participants in the the social communications platforms. Anyway, so lots and lots and lots of details about sort of the bottom line propositions to go over in the Friday call that are business critical and business sensitive. We want to begin our efforts to attract people to this vehicle in October. So that's only 2 weeks away. So we really want to close down, make sure that everyone in the co-op is behind this, and really get some energy energy and momentum around this. So please come to the Friday call and have your say. Anything else we want to cover in today's call?
Well, I would just like to remind everybody here that Rchain was born out of a attention economy social network project. And so as we kind of ascend our spiral staircase to the heavens, we see something kind of coming full circle, but at another level. Where we're now returning back to talking about and thinking about the things that spurred us to create Rchain in the first place. So this makes me personally very excited.
Thank you, Daryl. I really appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I am also excited, and it also feels good and right to me. I turned my attention to building Rchain because I knew that there wasn't a platform out there that would support this social media economic proposition. Now we have the platform, we can do it, and we've learned so much more about the blockchain space that the basic propositions associated with sort of an on-chain social media have shifted for the better. In my opinion, we have a much clearer vision of how the economics and the technology have to work from some fairly hard-won experience. So while we don't have to name the names of now defunct projects, we are able to deliver on those features, and it becomes important to deliver on those features for the Rchain mission. Awesome.
So we do have annual meeting coming up on October 24th and a couple of deadlines to keep in mind. So at the annual meeting, there will be 4 board seats that are being contested. And there are currently 6 nominees in the pipeline. And hopefully next week, the board will decide which of those nominees will be balloted. Also, items of business. If you have any items of business to bring forward to the annual meeting, please have them submitted by October 3rd. To vote in the annual meeting, members will have had completed their ID verification and register a Rev address. So the deadline for the ID verification, also October 3rd. And to submit your Rev address, you go to your notice of annual meeting, which should already have been emailed out to you about a month ago. And there's a link there to a form where you submit your Rev address that will be used in the voting. So you should have that done, well, as soon as possible would be good, but it has to be done, I believe, by October 20th.
Yes, exactly. Please, please, please. And if you know people who are excited and interested in the co-op, but they haven't submitted their Rev address for participation, it is absolutely critical. They must have a Rev address to participate in this year's voting. All right. Thanks to everyone. Really enjoyed today's conversation. As usual, we're making good forward progress, and look forward to speaking with many of you on Friday. Ciao for now.
Thanks, everybody.